Hello everyone, and welcome to this Dinosaur tutorial. Little bit of a random theme chosen today. What we're going to be building is this page over here. It's a timeline of the Mesozoic era. And the way it works is that there's a little car over here. And if the user presses the right button, the car moves forward. If the car moves back, then it hides. And whenever the car reaches a specific point in the timeline, then it appears. If they go backwards, then it disappears. So that's kind of the mechanics of what we're going to be making today. The one thing to note is that I'm going to be combining HTML, CSS, and JavaScript instead of just JavaScript or just HTML and CSS. Unfortunately, we're just a bit behind on marking, so we're just going to have one tutorial this week, unfortunately. But hopefully a bit of a combo is interesting for everyone. All right, so this is the one I've already made, but this is the one we have here. As you can see, I've got empty styles and JS. I've already added the HTML in. It's pretty basic. There's a main, there's a div for the car, there's sections for each of the eras and headings, etc. So that should all be fairly familiar. And yeah, so the one thing, let's start off by getting our font, our Jurassic Park style font onto the page. So to do that, we'll use an font face rule. So I've already downloaded the font and it's here in my fonts folder. So I can just say font family and I'm going to call it Jurassic Park. And the source is you go back a folder and then I go to my fonts and Jurassic Park and format type. Just one thing to note on this is that sometimes I've been seeing recently that VS Code is formatting things weirdly. Like you get this where there's a / in front of the file path like that. So either it's in the same, either the fonts folder is in the folder that I'm currently in, or if I need to go back a folder, then it's 2 dots and a /. So if you are getting that weird format like that, just install Path in IntelliSense. It's an extension, and you can just Google it. But anyway, there's the correct font there. And I'm going to add it to my H1 and H2. Just adding some backup fonts there. And so there it comes through. One thing though is that this font size is very small, like that's almost impossible to read. So what I can do is I can just increase the size of the headings. So I'm going to set my H1 to have a font size of 5M. And I'm just going to give it a margin of 10 pixels. Okay, there we go. It's a bit easier to read now. And then the H2, I'm just going to set it to have a font size of 3M. I mean the H2, oops, H2. So then that's just increased those font sizes a little bit. If you're not too familiar with M's, what's nice about them is that it allows, it's like more flexible for responsive, for users with accessibility issues. Say like if you are perhaps a bit visually impaired, like you struggle to read small text, you can have an extension on your browser that increases the font size, but you can't do that if it's set to pixels. But you can't, or you can't do it dynamically easily with pixels, but you can do that with M. So that's one reason to possibly use M or rem as well. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So that's just a little bit on that. Then I need to set I'm going to set a font on the body. So I've included a Google font style sheet here. So there's my Google font style sheet, and I've got this able font. So I'll just add that. Able, and I'll just set that to be Arial serif like that. And there we go. We get that able font on the page. Just a little thing in terms of setting up the style sheet. I probably won't do it very well in this tutorial because I'm coding live, but you'll notice that I didn't just put the body there. Even though I finished this section, I still wait and put it at the top. And the reason I do that is just that I want to kind of maintain a good structure in my CSS file. And so it makes sense to me to put the broader categories at the top. And so starting with the broadest, it would be body, but also I wanted to apply to everything. And as I want to get more specific as I go down, that's why I keep my media queries at the bottom as well. All right. The next thing I want to take a look at is the main. And I want to give it a background image. And that's in my images folder. And it's called background.png conveniently. And I'll just set that background size to cover. Right, there we go. So now I've got this background image there. It's taking up a lot of space just because I haven't controlled it in any way. I would want to set a max width on this thing. So I'm just going to set a max width of 1440px. And then I also want this to display grid. Right. And because currently they're all going down like this, and I don't want that. I want them to go across. So we set grid template columns, and I'll just repeat 3 times 1 fraction. So that's giving me 3 columns of 1 fraction each. So that's going to be, because there's 3, it's 1 over 3. So then it's 33.33 recurring percent. I need to set this to have a margin of 0 auto. That doesn't quite look correct there to me. I'm not sure what I did wrong there. Let's just quickly, I want to add a gap of 10 pixels and a padding of 10 pixels. Okay, let's have a look at what's going wrong here. Oh, so what's going wrong is that I've got 4 columns. So I need to set this H1. We did this, I think, in the last week's webinar, but where we don't want we want the columns we want to be is Triassic, Jurassic, and this one here, Cretaceous. We want this one to have its own row. And so to do that, we just say that the main H1 should have grid column start at 1 and end at -1, which effectively means that it takes up the full space. All right. So here, the reason that these are overflowing here is because I haven't set a width on these images. So these images are taking up the full available space for them. Yeah, and this is just pointing out about the / in the chat there. It has caused quite a bit of problems for us actually in terms of marking things. So just something to look out for. I've got an image inside my figure. So I don't know how much we know on figures, but here I've got a figure. And what's nice about the figure is that I can add a caption to it. So these images all have captions on them. So I just want to target this image inside the figure and set it to be a width of 100%. So to set figure image width 100%. So look, depending on your layout, it's quite likely that you'll want to make your widths to be 100%, or at least have a scalable width. So like a max width is generally what you're going to do. But obviously, you might have a unique situation. These sections, you'll note that they have two classes. So it allows me to be able to style these classes individually. So I can just use this era class to give like group styling to apply to all of them. So I'm going to add that they should have a background. Just grab this color. So that makes the text easier to read. They should have padding of 10 pixels. And so I personally don't like the fact that these images here, there's like a gap at the bottom here. So I want to push these images to the bottom all the time. And so to do that, I can use grids. A few ways to do it, but this is one of the ways with grids. So I can create grid template rows this time. And I'm going to say that I want the top row to be auto. So auto is the size that the thing is. And then I want the next one to be whatever's left. So one fraction. So it's going to take up whatever space hasn't been taken up by an auto row. So here you can now see that takes up an auto amount of space, and then that takes up the remaining space. So that whole thing takes up that available space. I hope that makes sense. So now it's pushed the images down to the bottom, which I think looks just maybe a little bit neater. I think we're nearly there. We just need to make the car, and then we'll deal with the opacity. So in my final version, we're going to have this set to opacity 0. And then when the car reaches it, we're going to change the opacity from 0 to 1. For now, let's just keep that off so we can see that and read up on our dinosaur history. So we've got this div of class car. And I'm just going to quickly style that. We've got this car, and it has a background of images car. And I need to set a width and height. So I'm going to set a width of 100 pixels and a height of 51 pixels. And I need to set a background size. So just set a background size of cover. Right, so there's our car over there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this car along. And the way I'm going to do that is using left. And so I need to position this absolutely. And I need to set the main to now have position relative. So I'm going to set this to be position relative. And this to be position absolute. Now it's automatically thrown at top left there, but that's not where I want it. I want it bottom 0 pixels, and I want the left also be 0 pixels. Okay, so there's my car over there. Great. So now we have the car over there. And what we can do now, so basically we've created the HTML and CSS we're going to use. The only thing that we need to do now is we need to work in JavaScript to move this car that way and then change the opacity on these elements. Okay, so let's take a look at our JavaScript. So we can use an event called onKeyDown. So that means that when the user presses a key on the keyboard, we can actually have a look and see which key they've pressed. And so it's going to be important for me to know whether they've pressed the right arrow or the left arrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create key down on the window, and I'm going to run a function. And I've got the event as a parameter of that function. And we can just console log the event for now. Okay, so now if I open my console, right, if I press a button, so there I've just pressed the up arrow. If I press the down arrow, you can actually see that it's telling me which key I've pressed. I can click left, right, whatever, any key, and I can see which key's been pressed on the page. What that's great for, it actually gives me this thing called a key code here. So I could even, I'm going to use that to test what button the user has clicked. So I'm going to say that, so for the right arrow, I know that that's not got a key code of 39 because I can see that. I can see that over there. So arrow right, that's got a key code of 39. So I can say that if event dot key code is equal to 39, console log, you've pressed right. Oh, I want to actually keep my console. So if I press right, then it logs out. If I press any other button, nothing happens. But if I press right, then I can move it right. Okay. So I know now that an event is happening from the keyboard. I know that the user has pressed the right arrow. And so what I can do is I can just try and move the car further that way. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called my left, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. So I'm using the let keyword because I want to change the value of my left as I work. So I'm going to say that if the person has pressed right, that my left should increase by 5. So I'll console log my left for you now quick. So now when I press right, you can see that it increases the amount of left of this variable my left. And so what I can do, if I select the car, let me quickly do that. And it's called, I'm going to call it my car. And so I'm going to say that my car style, the style.left should equal whatever this new value of my left is. Hit save on that, and let's see if it works. It's not working because I'm not adding pixels here. So I just need to add that to the string. So I can show you quickly what I've just done there. If we look, save that, go in here, we can see, we should be able to see that it's adding a left that's not correct. but it's not. So I don't know why it's doing that. But let's quickly just add in the string because I know I need to add pixels because that's the value of left. And now it's working, right? So if we look on the element here, you can see it has a style of left 30 pixels. And as I use it, right there, and you can see it increasing every time I hit the right key. If I hold it in, it increases like that. Okay. Now to do the opposite so that it can go backwards, I can just do exactly the same thing, except now I'm listening for the key code of 37, and that I wanted to now decrease by 5 each time. So whatever the value of my left is, I want it to decrease by 5. So you can see this plus equals is saying take whatever the value of my left is and add 5 to that. And here with minus equals, it's saying take the value of my left and minus 5 from it. Okay. So save that. And now I can move the car to the right and I can move the car to the left. So now we can move the car up and down, which is cool. The next thing that we need to do is we need to activate these to appear whenever the car reaches a certain point. So what I can do is I can test something called offset left. So let me quickly show you what that is. So I'm just going to log the value of my car. Open the console. And you can see now I'm logging the car div. And you can see that it's got a whole bunch of properties. So if you're not too familiar with the DOM, you can see there's this whole array of different properties. Well, some of them are arrays, but this whole group of different properties on the element. And so I'm logging out that whole element, and you can see that it's got certain things. One property that it has is something called offset left, and you can see there it's got this offset left here. I can also show you that this Triassic div. So let's have a look at that one. So the Triassic section, sorry. So if I target that, and I'm going to say Triassic. Save that. Look in the console again. Right, so here I have an offset left. There we are, of 5 on my car, but on the section with the class of Triassic. If I look, it also has an offset left, but it's got an offset left of 10. So what I can do is I can say that if car dot offset left is greater than Triassic dot offset left. So stop trying to hold me VS Code. So if the car offset left is greater than the Triassic offset left, then I know that the car's arrived at this point. Okay, so I'll just quickly console log. You've arrived. Okay. So I know already that it's 10. So now when it's moved to 5, Thank you. Now it's arrived, and now it can tell me that it's arrived. Okay, so that's great. I don't want to log you've arrived. What I want to do is I want to change the opacity. So I'm going to say that for these errors, the opacity should be set to 0, right? So they've gone. And my JavaScript, I'm going to say that if it's arrived to Triassic, then I want Triassic.style.opacity to equal 1. And there we go. Now it's showing. So now we just need to do the same for the other sections. The hardest ones as well. So I can just replicate this if statement. And that's Jurassic. And that's okay. So now if the car reaches the Triassic point, then it displays. I need to change that to Jurassic and that Cretaceous. Okay, so now it goes along, Triassic appears, then Jurassic and Cretaceous. I feel like it's a bit jarring, the jump. Now if we go back as well, nothing happens yet. So we just need to also handle that option of the person going back in their car. But just quickly, the transition, I didn't like that hard transition there. So we can just add a transition here of 1 second, and we'll just apply it to the opacity. Right, so as we go along, now it has that kind of soft fade in, which maybe looks a little bit cooler. And then, because we can just do the opposite, just swap that around. Right, so if the car, let's change that to 0, right? We need to hide. Okay, so if we go along, it displays. Next one displays, we go back. We can see that it now gets hidden. Don't think I have too much more to show. I can show you the that's kind of basically the thing I made. I don't know if it's interesting, but hopefully it's at least shown you a little bit about how we can use events that happen from things that the user does to be able to update what gets displayed on the page. So definitely. Oh, is it? I didn't know that. I checked that on MDN. I thought they'd said that I should use key code. And is here coming to the rescue. So I checked this before I did this, and it had said, maybe I read the wrong thing. I'll look at that in my own time. But thanks for that, Anders. No, we can change that now quick. It's not working now with code. Anyway, I'll have a look into that about key code versus code. But hopefully it's at least been a little bit interesting in terms of showing kind of what's happening on the DOM. Is there any questions from anyone? All right, if there's no questions, then I guess I'll wrap it up there. Yeah, thanks for coming along. Hopefully that was at least a little bit interesting and a little bit different. Just kind of trying to show some of the different things you can do with the code. We obviously teach quite traditional website building, but this is, I guess, a bit of fun as well. So hopefully kind of get a balance of kind of seeing what's out there and what you can do. So cool. Yeah, if we could that a quiz where you move along and you can go through different answers. Yeah, that could definitely happen.